Well, it is Monday. It's another edition of the Florida Daily Show. Lindsay Randall, my co-host. I mean, she's a mom, got 2 kids, spring break, so she's out today. That's okay. I'm not as pretty, but I'll try to keep it going. She'll be back with us like tomorrow or so, or on Tuesday. So she'll be back with us. But then again, thanks for everyone tuning in. Thanks for everybody reading FloridaDaily.com, one of the largest news publications that we have in the state. And of course, we combine that with the #1 radio show host. And by the way, for those of you and we'll put this up on the Facebook page or on FloridaDaily.com, the stations and the times that list my syndicated radio show here in Florida. But we broadcast out of the flagship station, which is WBOB Talk Radio out of Jacksonville. But we're in all these markets: Tallahassee, Orlando, Naples, all the way down to Miami, Orlando, Miami, Melbourne, all that kind of stuff as well. So anything that hits up, you email me at Florida Daily. Look at the email address that's there as well. But again, all of our sources. And by the way, as a reporter, may I say something? I'm blessed. God gets all the credit. Besides being the big top rated talk show host that I am here in the state, I want to remind everybody that even though we are center right at FloridaDaily.com, we report our articles like the way they should be. Many of you on my side don't like it. Well, there's an editorial that I read in the Orlando Sentinel. Actually, it was a news report, but it looked like an editorial. No offense, I subscribe to the Orlando Sentinel, the Sun Sentinel, the Tallahassee, whatever, Democrat. No, we do the same thing here, but we call the articles and the stories the way it should be. So that's how it is. We are, I guess you could say, always fair and balanced like the Fox News. But we don't give you a lot of nonsense. And, of course, we cover a lot of scams, a lot of consumer stories that nobody else seems to cover. And we call it the way it should be on both sides. But anyway, so today, one of my favorites. I've covered him for years as a reporter. He's in the studios with us today, I should say, or on the show today, is former House Speaker Paul Renner, and who now is one of the gubernatorial candidates running for governor here in the state of Florida. And first off, House Speaker Renner, I'm glad you came on. He comes on with us all the time. I've enjoyed it. I like that you're ramping up things. I've said this, and we'll get to this in just a little bit. I like the idea when you come on our statewide syndicated show, and you are on all of these markets, I get a lot of emails from people, and I'm jumping the gun, and I admit it, because I want to talk about the gubernatorial race. But let me just ask this out front, and I'll circle back around. I want to talk about some of the measurements or the legislation measurements that you would, or should I say past things that you've done, measure up to this year, or the lack of. Is there going to be any debates in this gubernatorial race? I get people ask me that all the time, and I say, my response is I don't make it up. That's a good question. Anything coming out there? Or is it just you and a couple others, or does it include Byron Donalds? What are you getting here in invites, and what are you seeing people respond? Are there going to be any big debates coming up?
Well, I would debate on any day that ends in Y, is to say every day. I think voters deserve a contrast and a comparison between the two candidates, or the candidates in the race, rather. I think ultimately it will be 2 candidates, me and Congressman Donalds. He has avoided that. To my knowledge, he hasn't agreed to any debates. I have. I think some of the other candidates have as well. And so we should have debates. We should have frequent opportunities to be side by side. And I think when we have that comparison, I know when we have that comparison, we're going to win this race.
Yeah, you've got it. And I will say this again. We call it the way it is on this radio show. We call it this way is on Florida Daily TV as well, which we don't use that word TV anymore, but also here at the Florida Daily Show. Is that one I've noticed about the campaigns? Byron's got a lot out there with the endorsements, to his credit as well. But when I see something from grassroots campaign and we look at what's being talked about, and this is not an endorsement, we just call it the way it is. I see more grassroots groups coming out on your campaign. Now I understand it's March. Some may come out on other campaigns as well, but I see a lot of more grassroots coming out. What is the biggest question? Forget about Democrats. We can address that in a few minutes. When you talk to the GOP, you talk to Republicans, Republican clubs, what is their biggest concern? Give me 1 or 2 issues. Is it the property insurance, property taxes? I don't think it can be really DEI anymore. What are you hearing?
Well, it's 2 things broadly, I would say. One is affordability, and broadly, property taxes, insurance, electric bills, the cost of everything is one big category. And I think the other would be threats that they see that are coming to our country, that are coming to Florida. Sharia law, the threat of radical Islam taking a toehold here in Florida, the effect of open borders, allowing Chinese and Iranian nationals to come across our border and threaten our country, these types of things. And they want to keep Florida safe, and they want to keep Florida free.
we're going to throw a lot around today. It's totally unscripted. I mean, that's the way it is on my radio show. We just, I'm not like a TV anchor where I have to use certain cue cards. You don't have the same thing. We just have a series of several questions. And again, it's not scripted. But I got to ask some national issues on a state level here. When you were the House Speaker, we noticed that this was seemed to be really ramped up in 2024. This whole idea with China. This was an interesting conversation during the Biden years where China was buying up farmland next to or just near military bases in other states. And then we find out, guess what? There was a threat that they were going to be buying up some of those that, again, the perception, and they did buy up land here in Florida. They were going to buy up more land, maybe near electrical grids. How did you see that when you were the House Speaker? Was that something that was talked about or was not heavily talked about, or was that something that was coming on the horizon then? I was always curious about that conversation. Again, the Chi-Coms owning land here in Florida.
Well, we passed a bill when I was Speaker, and it restricted purchase to anywhere near a military base or any critical infrastructure. Think about electrical, water facilities, anything where in a hot war they would be next door nearby where they could attack those facilities and destroy us and hurt our infrastructure. And so there's a bill that we did pass. I think we need to do more. I've been public about having no Chinese students in our universities. We saw several years back when they stole our research. They came in either as professors or as students and working in the research side of things. We're stealing all of our latest research and taking it back to the Chinese Communist Party. So we have to understand, and it's nothing against young people that want to study, they're not going to come here unless they have the permission of the Chinese Communist Party, which is another way of saying they're spies and they're working for them. And so we have to be steely-eyed and open about what the real threats are and say it out loud. And I've said it out loud, which we cannot have those people in our universities. We saw that theft in the Confucius Institutes that they were using as a hub basically on campus to foment their agenda on campus, and also using their students and professors that were here temporarily to steal our ideas, steal our research.
You bring up something. We've covered this at FloridaDaily.com, also in the radio show. A vast amount of percentages during the Biden years of Chinese nationals illegally entering not just the U.S., but here in Florida rose, they say, by like almost 150% of what was going on. When you hear this and you hear and we see what's going on in Iran, you served in the military. If you had to look at, and they're talking about sleeper cells, and believe me, I don't want to, try to embellish this, Speaker Renner, but Florida would be a great spot. I know that we had when we had the 9/11. Oh my word, Florida was unfortunately a top area of where they were looking at to go after those that may be associated with Al Qaeda and the Taliban, and they were deporting guys. I reported back then as a reporter. They were deporting. There was no questions asked. If your visas wasn't up to par, they weren't taking any chances. No excuses. You were gone. Okay. When you look at this, and you've served in the military, and again, we're going to get some state issues here. What is the bigger threat? Is it what we see in the Middle East, or is it from the Chi-Coms? Go ahead. Could you hear us?
I lost you there for a minute.
Yeah. So my question is what is the biggest threat that you perceive as a former military individual here in the country, in the state of Florida? Is it sleeper cells from the Middle East, or is it more about the Chi-Coms?
Well, I mean, I think the more immediate threat is the sleeper cells, because if they're activated, in this case by Iran, I would assume, then that could yield an attack this afternoon as we're speaking. The longer threat, though, is what Charlie Kirk talked about, a red threat and a green threat, both the threat from the left, Chinese Communist Party, the left in this country, sadly, that really, at the end of the day, you have to conclude hates this country and is inviting us to enter into a suicide pact. And the same can be true of the green threat of Islam and its effect, having let people into this country that never intend to assimilate, that want to force you to assimilate to them, or you face death. This is what's happened throughout history, and we have to be, again, steely-eyed about the threat of these Muslim enclaves we see across Europe that are now developing here in the United States. When I served in the military, remember the refrain was, we have to fight them abroad, so we don't have to fight them here at home. And then we welcomed them into our home. And it was a huge mistake. It's going to be a lot harder now to remedy that, but I think we have to do it. I heard the governor speak yesterday about the fact, and I agree with him completely, we ought to look at denaturalization and deportation of these people who have committed fraud, committed crimes. This guy that just shot the guy at Old Dominion was already arrested for material assistance to terrorism, convicted, and then let out back on the street. He should have served his time and been deported, denaturalized, and deported out of the country. And I think we have to be realistic that this is not an ideology in the case of Islam and radical Islam, or whatever you want to call it, that is ever going to assimilate. And in fact, their goal is world conquest and the extermination of anyone who does not bow to Allah. And for my part, we're not bowing here in the state of Florida.
Yeah, I remember back in the days in the 2000s where UCF, it's a brilliant school, but it's invited some would say some unwanted activity. I remember where they would allow during the Gulf War, the second one, and they would bring in some Muslim characters who had chanted "Death to America." And I remember covering it as a reporter back then that we don't want these people to come speak because and I get that a lot of the Jewish committees didn't want it. I'm a free speech guy. I used to sit back and say, dude, allow these guys to come in and then heckle them and expose them. I don't want any silence on any of these individuals because I want to expose them what's going on. When we talk about state issues, it's still the number one issue is property insurance under that whole affordability dome. It's property insurance, property taxes. I believe gasoline prices are going to be one of the top issues. Let me play for you a couple of clips here. This was last year, Fox News 13, where Citizens Insurance, the insurer of last resort, I'm sometimes even curious if that's even accurate, where last year in 2025, they were asking for around a 6.5% rate increase in what has changed from a year from back then. And listen to the clip.
The largest insurer in the state of Florida is still trying to regain its status as the insurance of last resort. Citizens Property Insurance, though, is raising rates for most homeowners across the state by an average of 6.6%.
Now, this year, we've seen again, they have to get permission from the legislature. Why did the increase go up? That was 2025, but now they're asking for a decrease. What are we seeing?
Well, when I was speaker, we had transformational reform of litigation abuse in the state. We're A++ in so many different areas, but we have the Wild West of litigation. Every other billboard, every other TV commercial is a plaintiff's attorney, and that's just the state we live in. And so we wanted to bring that into the middle of the fairway. The plaintiff, if somebody's done wrong by you and committed negligence, they have to pay up. But at the same time, they had just too many tools in the toolbox, heads I win, tails you lose kind of rules when it comes to litigation that we reformed. And as a result of that, you mentioned Citizens, there were 1.4 million policies on Citizens, which you and I as taxpayers have to back. So if there's a hurricane in Miami, far away from Jacksonville or wherever you might live or in the Panhandle, you're going to pay the bill because that Citizens ratepayer is backed by the taxpayers.
That's right.
Because of those reforms, it's now the lowest in Florida history, which means if we do have that horrible Cat 5 hurricane, the effect on taxpayers is going to be much, much lower. We've lowered that exposure down and the risk to taxpayers, which is a very, very good thing. And we see now that more insurers are coming into the state. We have insurers that are lowering rates or at least keeping rates even. My rates went up. It's not perfect yet. There's more we can do. When I'm governor, we're going to do that. But nonetheless, we see a much better insurance market than we saw in the years before those reforms, which is November of 2022. And we believe, and the insurance commissioner believes, we're going to see more benefits in the next year or two, that we're not done with the benefit because of all the lawsuits that were filed on top of that.
I want to get to that. Here's another clip from Fox 13 with the reason insurance and then Citizens Insurance. You could kind of sometimes lump those two in some ways. Again, why the rates are going up. Some are blaming the lawsuits. Listen to the clip here.
If you're a Citizens Property Insurance policy holder, most of you will see your rates go up. But insurance experts say this could be a good thing. The state approved a 6.6% rate hike for Citizens multi-peril policies and 14.5% for wind-only policies.
Again, this is 2025. Listen to the clip here.
The Florida Office of Insurance Regulation bumped down Citizens' original proposal for a statewide 13.5% increase. Former Deputy Insurance Commissioner Lisa Miller says the rate hike will actually drive down rates in the long run. She says the influx of contracting claims and lawsuits that followed are to blame for the skyrocketing premiums over previous years.
Okay, the reason why I wanted to play this, I have thousands of these clips. The reason why I want to play this is You just said something, and I know that a lot of sides, the insurance lobby, the trial lobby, they all follow my radio show and they all follow Florida Daily. You were speaker 2022 to 2024. You passed these reforms. Now it's 2026. Now you're saying, hey, we got more to do. The trial lawyers, I get all their emails. Hey, Ed, next time you have these guys come on, ask them how many more years are they going to use? This is their questioning here, House Speaker Paul Renner. How many more years are they going to say, well, it's coming around. It's coming around. It's going to happen sooner. And now they're saying it. Now it's 3, now going to 4 years later before things. And they really, some people would say they still haven't seen significant stabilization in the market. How do you answer that?
Well, it's just not true, because when I came in 2022, the market was literally collapsing. You had dozens of insurers that were going out of business, dropping people abruptly, and they got thrown on to like a government supported plan, or Citizens in that case. And so what we see now is a lot more competition, new insurers coming in. You know, the facts are the facts, and you can go to the Office of Insurance Regulation, where dozens of insurers are now filing their new rate request either even or at below what they were charging before in terms of the rate. Now, if your home value has gone up and construction costs have gone up, that may mean that your rate's gone down, but your overall premium has gone up. That's what I experienced this year. My rate actually went down, but they want an extra $70,000 worth of coverage on top of it because of the price of things. And so that's a different issue. But we do see some people who are seeing reductions even in property insurance. But where we see an even bigger benefit is in automobile rates that have gone down. State Farm's the biggest one, a 20% drop. They're sending refund checks to consumers. Progressive's down 15%. And I think over all the big insurers are down about 6 or 8%. And it's not going down anywhere else in the country. And so my response to them is, well, it is going down. Are we there yet? No. And that's the reason for that is they went out and filed over 200,000 lawsuits in the days prior to the governor signing that bill, which was the property insurance was November of 22. And then in March of 23, we passed the larger litigation reform bill that affects automobile rates. They went out and filed a boatload, a record number of lawsuits under the old rules. Some of those cases are still moving through the system under the old rules where it's heads I win, tails you lose, the lawyers always win. And that's causing an increased pressure on rates, while the reforms are also starting to put downward pressure. So when that moves through, if you talk to the insurance commissioner, he certainly believes we have another year or two of benefit, because once those lawsuits move through the system and everybody's on the new rules that are fair, we're going to continue to see downward pressure on rates. However, there's more we can do. My Safe Florida Home to lower property insurance, regulatory reform to lower property insurance. And I think we can do that and see reductions of 5-10% in property insurance across the board and continue to lean into this. I know because I've actually done it. I'm the only one in this race that's actually done anything about getting after property insurance, and we'll continue to lean in. I don't believe we're there yet. I'm not declaring victory, but we can do more, and I believe we will do more when I'm governor.
But to be fair as well, the governor also put $2 billion aside for reinsurance, which also kind of helps stabilize certain things. So, you know, there was a hand with that. Having said all of this, you're a lawyer. So if you had to sit back and let's don't do all of the above. Let's say it's 1, 2, or 3. If you believe things are turning around, is it because of the tort reform? Is it because of the reinsurance that you guys would put into place to make things more stable or to promote more stabilization? Or is it because, as others have said, there's more supply of insurance companies coming into the state that also helps lower cost? So if it's one out of those 3, or maybe one I've even mentioned, I mean, everybody can say it's all of the above, but if there's one that sticks up higher, the reason why rates are coming down, according to some, what is it? More affordability, more insurance companies coming in, or is it because of the tort reform that was passed?
Well, I would argue that our reforms did all of those things, really, in the sense that it brought more competition. It is giving stability, because what these insurers need is they can estimate how many hurricanes and how much damage. What they can't estimate is somebody coming up, knocking on your door and saying, hey, I'll get you a free roof, or I'll get you a free auto windshield, and then colluding with lawyers to jack up rates, file a lawsuit, have these old rules that we eliminated where heads I win, tails you lose. I win the case, you pay my fees. You win the case, I don't pay your fees. This kind of thing that generated a lot of fraud and litigation abuse, we eliminated that. That's why we have more competition. That's why reinsurers are willing to enter the market again because they have some stability and expectation that they can guess correctly about what kind of damage is coming. They could not operate in this environment where everybody's getting a free roof or everybody's, gaming the system, and all of us pay that bill while a handful of people get rich. So I would argue that has driven the benefits that you mentioned across the board, and including in reinsurance, because they have the confidence of coming back into this market and not getting their heads chopped off because of something that has nothing to do with how many hurricanes we may have in any given year. They're very, very good at looking at that and predicting what those damages will be and setting prices. They're not good at man-made disasters that lawyers and bad actors create in the market.
Well, let's go to a fun question here. So News 4 Jax, WJXT, put, I guess the governor was at a press conference over the weekend talking about the legislative session. In his remarks, it was about a 60-minute. So I didn't get this clip. I'll do it when you come on the radio show, but I was going to get the clip going, but I don't want to, too long. But in the story, one of our researchers, one of our reporters said that the governor explicitly praised former House Speaker Paul Renner, calling their legislative partnership historic and unmatched. He stated that you will never be able to match that. No one in the country has been able to match that whatsoever. Didn't mention anybody else, by the way. I'm just telling you, this is what was reported from the governor. Some people are going to ask, hey, that's a great remark. That would almost be like a key endorsement. Some are going to ask, man, why isn't the governor come out and endorse anybody in this race? I mean, that is a compliment right there. He doesn't do that with a lot, especially what you see with the last session. That's probably one question. But what has happened? Some of these people that are now, and this is a little more inside baseball. The governor's not happy. He didn't get much what he wanted last year. It's a glorified, a food fight. He didn't get what he wanted this past year. You worked with some of these guys. Was it like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving the House speakership. It's going to go south after this. And pretty much it has gone south after you left. How do you look at what's going on in Tallahassee? Normally these are problems with Democrats, Republicans. Now it's Republicans and the governor.
Well, the governor's comments are a very nice compliment. Being, he's the GOAT as a governor, and being the GOAT as a House Speaker, best ever speaker in Florida, is a pretty nice compliment. And so I just tell people on the campaign trail, if you like those 2 years where we really built the free state of Florida, you'll like 8 years with me as governor. And so leadership does matter. The House and Senate are largely the same. There was another, group that came in the 24 election after I termed out that are freshmen, but largely you have a lot of good conservatives there, and you got some people that are not so conservative. But the point is, leadership matters. And if you're a conservative speaker, a DeSantis-style conservative speaker like I was, even those less conservative members know that it's time to, go along and support your conservative speaker in getting those big wins we got. And so leadership is everything. And I think that's what this race is really about, is do you want somebody who's shown up for the fights, beaten the left over and over again, and help build the free state of Florida? Because everybody's worried about going backwards when DeSantis is gone. I'm one of those people. I know we won't when I'm governor, because I know how to lean in. I know how to beat the left and deliver results and deliver victories. I did it.
The governor has said something here, and some people laugh at this. I look at numbers. You look at numbers here. I was an economics reporter for years. I covered city budgets, counties budgets, dealing with economy growth rate and everything else. And I look at numbers here, and bear with me for a second. The governor has said, hey, it is possible this state could turn purple again. Now, you wouldn't think so when you look at the numbers. Now, follow me for a second, for all of you on the audience watching this, okay, there's a big spread of Republicans versus Democrats, but everybody seems to forget the growing number of registered voters coming into the state of Florida. A lot of them happen to be called non-party affiliation, independents, that may not always vote the way that we think, Speaker Renner, they should vote our way. Then we find out, we did a big story at FloridaDaily.com back, might have been 2023, 2024. Remember when you were the House Speaker during the Biden years, called temporary protection status? There were, people cutting in front of the line, coming illegally into the state, into the country. Biden flew all of these people. They think at least there was like 300,000 from Honduras and Cuba and Nicaragua came into the state of Florida. The question is, where do they all go? And then we find out that the brand new Democratic mayor of Miami, Florida, said, oh yeah, we still have about 200,000 plus of those people that are still staying here inside the county. I believe, and I don't think this is a scare tactic, but it is possible where Florida, I mean, look at Georgia. There have been areas where Georgia's been red. Now they got 2 Democratic senators. I mean, look at Florida. You know this, they would vote for Jeb Bush, Rick Scott, and then they vote for liberal Bill Nelson, a split ticket. And that was when Florida was more blue out there. Do you believe that maybe not tomorrow, but if things don't go the way they should, dealing with the property insurance, dealing with the affordability issue, Florida could go blue again?
100%. Look at California. They voted for a president twice in the 1980s and never can elect really anybody statewide since.
Republicans, yeah.
Leadership does matter. And if the state's not moving forward, that's what's been great about the governor. I was one of his main partners to make sure we were leaning into issues that people applauded and people wanted. The mess you've seen over there the last 2 years and not getting any delivering on affordability, property taxes, insurance, electric bills, all these things will have a negative effect on Republicans at the ballot unless we return to someone who is a strong leader to take over for this governor, unless we have a turn to greater leadership in the legislature. And I believe we will in the next 2 years. And so it's very important that we continue to lean into issues that address people's needs. You've got to make people's lives better. And if you're messing around and all you care about is self-promotion, getting wealthy in office, having fun,
we'll get to that.
Scores, you're never going to keep the majority. People will reject that, as they should.
But here's a little more inside baseball for the audience. How is it? Give me your analysis here. How is it? Now I'm going to get some other issues. I want to talk about your opponents here in a moment as well. Some of the stuff that you've said, and we got the clips. How is it that the governor wins re-election, gets a boatload of support to run for president? Hey, it didn't pan out. And a lot of those guys that were supporting him have totally flipped now that his last 2 years in office. What is it? Some people are going, what happened here?
Well, I mean, I can give you my opinion. I think a lot of it's ego, and there's too much ego and arrogance in politics.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah. And I've got no use for it. I've always been, as a military guy, I'm a mission focused leader. And I think, I would be the third naval officer as governor, Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, and me. And it's less talk, more action. Check your ego at the door. We've got a job to do.
I love it. That's a great, I didn't even think about the naval officer one out here. Here is CFO Blazing Goliath. This is what he said about, and by the way, I want to talk about this: rollbacks, property taxes, spending. Here's what the chief financial officer of the state said about property taxes and the values versus the rollbacks.
They haven't raised millage rates in 16 years. They're still raising property taxes. Let's not fall into that trap, because that's a trap that local governments say, that we've held the millage rate the same. As property values rise, millage rates should fall to keep the level of government to the same. If millage rates stay the same while property taxes rise, it is a huge tax increase on people.
Yeah. Now, you've advocated something a little bit more different. I understand, because even, by the way, we do this every flipping year at Florida Daily. One of us, either it's me or one of our reporters, we've done this for like the last 3 to 4 years, where there are more Republican red, I'm talking hardcore DeSantis Trump counties, that are raising their taxes, not Democrats, Republican counties. And I get the typical norm. If you're in Duval, if you're in Orange County, some of the areas where that Republicans just blacked out. It's all Democrats out there as well. And the issue that you've got a few Republicans in some of these areas that even act like Democrats, and it's Tampa as well. It's Miami. I can expect those blue areas to raise taxes here, Speaker Renner, but for all these Republican areas to raise the taxes as well. And when you mention this, they go, well, wait a second. The values raised, we didn't raise the millage rate whatsoever. You have said, no, enough here. You've talked about rolling it back, but how far and how would you roll it back?
Well, first of all, Blazing Googly is spot on in his explanation. And the governor talked about this at his press conference when he came in, that it's gone from like $30-some billion of property taxes overall to $60 billion. And these local officials can say, well, we never raised the millage rate, but we know that the dramatic increase in property taxes accomplishes a huge windfall where property taxes have risen far, far faster than incomes. And that's the problem. And so what I simply said is, let's work. We're going to see what the governor comes out with in terms of a permanent reset on property taxes, which I am sure I will be able to support. And that's a good thing. That's the permanent solution. But as a temporary measure with this friction in the legislature. They've been talking about it for a year and a half and have really done nothing to help people today that need relief. And so I called for a rollback as a first step. It's the one thing we can do in the legislature. And of course, they just died and adjourned yesterday to go back to an earlier date. You can go back to 2024, 23, 22. And do it legislatively with a 2/3 majority, which we have. And so that's what I've said. And that way you can pull out your tax bill and say, wow, my taxes would go down 500, 1,000, whatever the case may be, to give everybody relief right this minute. And then additionally, pursue what the governor's talking about, which is enshrining it in the Constitution so that it's permanent. But the problem is you got to get the House and Senate to agree, which they've failed to do on so many issues we've talked about, at 60% to put anything on the ballot. As we speak right now, there's not a single thing on the ballot to save you $1 in taxes. And then if they do get together with the governor in this special session, it's got to get 60% this fall. And if it doesn't do that, if the League of Cities come out against it, which
they will.
If the Democrats come out against, which they will, then it may not hit 60%. The governor's going to really have to go out and campaign for it if he gets what he wants. And so there's a lot of what ifs there is my point. That's why I wanted the rollback. Let's guarantee people that are leaving our state, which I don't want to see as a future governor. I don't want somebody who's lived here their whole life to leave the state because of taxes and insurance. Let's roll back taxes, do something right now. You could do it in 2 or 3 days and do it right now. And then let's get something permanent in the Constitution that's more substantial.
You just said something, what if? And I think it's quite possible we may not get anything to at least the likening, like what you would like to see, like what I would like to see. This isn't perfect. Listen, I love my governor. I don't know what's taking a little bit longer for this, but the bottom line is the whole property tax debate. You're not going to eliminate the property tax. The businesses are going to get hit. The non-homestead. I'm all for doing it. My view is, hey, there's areas where maybe we can put more on tourists and add more for the sales tax. But at least this is a conversation you myself have had for over the last year on this issue. I don't give a flip about the Democrats. They still like the higher tax rate as well. They don't even said anything about or even try to contribute to this. But right now, the what if, is it possibly a what if that this may not even get on the ballot this year? Or do you think something is?
Well, that's exactly the point. And the reason I call for the rollback, because there's a lot of risk that nothing happens, that you don't get any savings. And now we have to wait until 2028. And so what I've said is roll it back right now, hold everybody in a better place, give everybody listening a tax break. That includes businesses, that includes renters, where your landlord's going to get a reduction. And often that pass through, just like your rent's going up because of the pass through for insurance and taxes, that would mean that the landlords could actually bring rents down. Let's do that right now. Right now, we can guarantee that legislatively without having to worry about the back and forth. But if they don't get it done, the House and Senate don't agree, and it's clear, it's very obvious the House does not want to do what the governor wants to do and give him a win. Now, to their credit, I want to give credit where credit's due. They did send something over, but I just don't know that that's not a little gamesmanship to say we did something. But they did pass something. I want to be fair and call balls and strikes. And so let's see what they get together and do. I'm hopeful that maybe they can get together, but then we got to get to 60% on the ballot. You got to get Democrats and independents to come on board and say, yeah, we like that. When a lot of people will come out and say, hey, that's going to wreck this or that, and they try to kill it and keep it under 60%. And that could happen. And that's why the rollback today is important, to preserve a win, preserve people's homes today while we work on something more permanent.
So a lot of people he's going to come back on with us many times. I got a few more questions I want to get to, but I mean, the bottom line is that, I'm with you on a lot of these measures. I want to talk a little bit about the race. And again, the House Speaker is going to come on with us many times over the next several months, whatever. He's in it for the long run. I can tell you that right now. We've covered that for the governorship. But here was what you said about Congressman Byron Donalds about, the whole school choice thing. The congressman was up during school choice week up in the state legislature talking about how that they passed universal school choice when it was the Hope Scholarship. Even I was like, back then, I was like, why are we, I've never understood, why did conservatives have to make excuses to give parents a reason why to send their child to a private school or charter school? Well, if your kid gets bullied, that's it. This is what, we already know what he said. This is what you said. This was back in January of this year.
So I wake up this morning to see Congressman Donalds on video literally claiming that he was here in the Florida House when we passed universal school choice. Byron, that's a lie, because I passed universal school choice in 2023. You were nowhere near Tallahassee. You passed the Hope Scholarship, HB1, which was political theater and barely moved the needle. That was not universal school choice, and you know it. I know you have a thin record both in the House and in Congress, but do me a favor and don't run on mine.
That's fine.
Let's have an honest campaign with voters. Let's tell them about my experience.
Okay, so you've got that one. Give me another one. If you say, hey, people coming up to you, I know they do it. All right. Okay, House Speaker, you, Congressman Donalds, give us some differences here.
Well, let's stick with credibility. So he made that statement. Of course, there's only one universal school choice bill, obviously, because universal means everybody. That happened in 2023. It was HB1. It was a top priority of mine. I was very actively involved in getting that across the finish line. And so he was in Congress since 2020. And so it's kind of a George Santos style whopper to claim that. And you didn't play his clip, but if you listen to it, because I listened to it a couple of times to say, is he, is there, I want to, call balls and strikes here, but no, he actually said he was here when we passed universal school choice. He remembers the debate, like he was here, maybe here in the gallery, but not on the House floor. And I think he was in Congress. Oh, I know he was in Congress, but he wasn't here to vote on universal school choice. But more recently, Ed, he's had these prior arrests. He said for over 30 years that he was arrested, just somebody stopped me, some cop stopped me, pats me down, I got marijuana. And I think a lot of people say, well, he was young. We all did dumb stuff when we were young. But the problem is, I think that people need to look at is until last week in an interview with Jim DeFeeti, he was saying that that was it. And now he's admitted that he was actually selling drugs. He was a dope dealer back then, not just possessing marijuana. And why is that important? Because he tries to draw this line, well, I'm a changed man. I had this conversion way back when, but he's been lying about it publicly, including in national interviews saying this was all that happened. There was nothing here to see. I just happened to have a little bit of pot on me. Now he comes clean because maybe somebody's about to come out and tell the truth that he was actually selling marijuana, and it's a credibility issue. If you've been lying to voters for 30 years since then about what really happened, if you have a conversion, you come clean with that and say, look, I did a lot of things. Here's what I did. Here's the truth, but I'm changed now. No, he's been lying to us all along, just like he did about universal school choice. And then you look at stock trades where he's not been honest about disclosing, has actually violated the Stock Act by not disclosing his insider trading, which I think is insider trading that's been happening while he's been on the committee overseeing financial services, overseeing these companies in whose stocks he's trading. And so there's a credibility issue there with Congressman Donalds.
Let me play for you a clip. In 2024, it was a big debate. Amendment 3, recreational marijuana. Amendment 4, making abortion a right in the Constitution in the state of Florida. And this is what Governor DeSantis said. And we were covering that at Florida Daily. We were covering it on my radio show. And he was making complaints. And some people are like, well, where are these other? I mean, like, without mentioning any names, I could mention quite a few. Some of these congressmen and women, by the way, got elected on the coattails of Governor DeSantis in 2022. That's probably one of the reasons why Republicans won. I had 3/4 House seat majority. That was because redistricting. And then the governor came out in 2025 and said this, a lot of it referring to Congressman Byron Donalds. A lot of people say this, where was he on Amendment 3 and Amendment 4? Couldn't be found. These were the big amendments that were defeated in 2024. This is what the governor said.
My view is Donald Trump just got into office. I want these congressmen focused on enacting his agenda. They haven't done very much yet. They're not putting his executive orders into place. We'll see what they do on the spending. But we have such a narrow majority that to be trying to campaign other places and missing these votes, I think is not something that's advisable at all. And so the reality is we've achieved victories in Florida. We need to start achieving those victories up there. So I think people look at it and say, you got a guy like Byron. He just hasn't been a part of any of the victories that we've had here over the left over these last years. He's just not been a part of it.
There you hear. I mean, that's what the governor said.
Well, we talked before about Florida going blue. And listen, on pot and abortion, those were all going to pass. It's a 60% threshold, and they all got more than 50% in the end, but they only failed because the governor went out and campaigned against it. And there's only one other leader, one other person in this race for governor that went out and campaigned against it. And you're looking at him. Byron Donalds sent out a tweet. That's not leadership. I raised and donated out of my political committee $2 million I can't use to run for governor to stop out-of-state billionaires from wrecking our state constitution with their own personal agenda to make us a pot state, to make us an anything-goes abortion destination. And so I led. None of the other candidates that talk a game, everybody's a campaign conservative, but not everybody's a true believer. Not everybody shows up to the fight to beat the left. I'm the only one in this race that's done that, and I'll do it again as governor.
House Speaker Paul Renner probably went a little longer than normal, but hey, that's the beauty about the Florida Daily Show. And, radio, I'm always limited the time and stuff like that. But I know you're going to have to come back on with this. By the way, if people want to know about the campaign, where can they go to?
VoteRenner.com, VoteRenner.com, and follow us on social media. We'd love to have you volunteer for our grassroots team. Obviously, make a contribution and have your support. House
Speaker Paul Renner, the Florida Daily Show. We've been around since 2018, at least the Florida Daily, but we decided to do the Daily Show. I'm glad you came on. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Paul Renner here, and Lindsay Randall will be back with us. She's got kids, so like I said, she's on spring break with the kids and stuff like that. This week, wait till I tell you a boatload of guests. I want to talk about putting a levy cap on local municipalities on their government spending. Is it possible? Wait till you hear the guests we got coming on this week with that. Also, gasoline prices up by $1 here in the state of Florida. And the bottom line is, how many are all happy with that? I mean, we know what it's dealt with. So we'll get into all that. I want to talk about, where is the issue of transgender sports in the state of Florida? Is it dead? So we got some sportcasters going to talk about it with us this week. Ready for tomorrow. By the way, read everything at floridadaily.com. I'm your host. I'm the publisher, Ed Dean, and this has been the Florida Daily Show.